Los Angeles always struck me as two cities in one. There's LA by day, where sunshine illuminates even the tired cracks in the sidewalks, where palm trees cast crooked shadows on busy highways. Then there's LA by night, which is a place of electric glow and hidden corners, neon signs, and faint music drifting out of swanky clubs. It's at night that the city reveals its other personality, slightly dangerous, endlessly thrilling. Or maybe that's just how I've always seen it. From the safety of my well-ordered life, I should introduce myself. My name is Olivia, and until a few months ago, my day-to-day existence moved with the monotony of clock hands. Home, work, home, a bland happy hour if I could muster the energy. Rinse and repeat. You might think, living in a vibrant city like LA, I'd be out dancing under strobe lights or hunting down exclusive art galleries in Venice Beach. But the truth is, I'd carved out a small, safe corner for myself in this sprawling metropolis, a bubble that kept me sheltered from heartbreak, disappointment, and messy entanglements. That bubble started to crack the day Samantha arrived at our advertising agency. It was the beginning of a hectic Monday when I first saw her in the open concept workspace. She was shaking hands with our creative director, who was smiling like she'd just won the lottery. Samantha had tousled blonde hair haphazardly gathered into a bun, and she wore a worn leather jacket over a simple t-shirt and jeans. In an office full of meticulously curated outfits, from tailored blazers to stiletto heels, she stood out for her casual confidence. She carried herself as though she belonged here, and somehow, she did. I felt a strange flutter in my stomach, an inexplicable awareness of her presence even from across the room. When she walked by my desk, she paused long enough to flash me a small grin. "Hey," she said. "I'm Samantha. Guess we'll be working together, huh?" "Looks like it," I replied, forcing a smile. My heartbeat fluttered. I wanted to hold eye contact, but I faltered, dropping my gaze to the keyboard. My entire body felt warm from her simple hello. Working in the design team, Samantha jumped into new projects with fearless energy. I watched her present to our managers that same afternoon. No sign of first-day jitters. She used words like authentic and vibrant to describe her approach. I could see the entire room transfixed by her confidence, which was somehow both easygoing and razor-sharp. It made me want to stand up straighter, maybe even step out of my own comfort zone. By the end of that day, rumors were already circling about the new girl who might revolutionize the design department. Usually, I tuned out office gossip, but that night, as I drove home through LA's congested roads, I couldn't stop thinking about her. How her eyes, a shade of green that brought to mind a forest I'd once visited near Big Sur, had drifted toward me whenever she made a particularly bold statement in her presentation, like she wanted my validation or feedback. As I crawled along the freeway, I reminded myself that this was just a new colleague. She'd be one more face among many at the agency. But that night, alone in my apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window, something in me felt changed. I gazed at the skyline, dotted with glowing windows, and wondered what new possibilities might be hiding behind them. For the first time in a long while, I felt the tug of curiosity pulling me past the boundaries I'd so carefully built. I shrugged off that unsettled feeling, chalking it up to the natural buzz of meeting someone intriguing. I had a routine to maintain. Dinner, a half hour of light reading, then bed by 11. The next day would be just another Tuesday. Everything would remain the same, if only I'd known how wrong I was. In the week that followed, Samantha slipped into the rhythm of the agency so smoothly you'd think she'd been there for years. She quickly formed alliances with the design team, brainstorming creative concepts that had our creative director nearly bouncing on her toes with excitement. My role in project management often put me in the same meetings with her. While she pitched imaginative ideas, I'd track budgets and timelines. We were two puzzle pieces from different ends of the board, meeting in the middle. One afternoon, the two of us found ourselves in the company kitchen at the same time, rummaging for coffee filters in a near-empty supply cabinet. Samantha let out a soft laugh when her hand brushed mine. "You'd think an agency this size would keep better stock of basics," she joked, retrieving the last filter and waving it in triumph. I smiled politely. "You'd be surprised how quickly we go through coffee." She began prepping the coffee maker with an easy familiarity. "Want some?" "I never say no to coffee," I admitted. We fell into a surprisingly natural conversation while waiting for it to brew. She asked about my role, how long I'd been with the agency, whether I liked it. In turn, I asked about her background. She'd just moved to LA from a smaller design firm in Chicago. She found the city exhilarating but lonely, as if no one stayed still long enough to truly connect. "It's all bright lights and tall buildings," she said, "but sometimes I miss the sense of community you get in smaller places." I nodded. LA can definitely feel isolating. She glanced at me with that half smile that seemed to hint she knew more than she let on. "You must have a tight circle of friends, though." I almost laughed at the assumption. "Not really. Mostly just coworkers I see at happy hour once in a while." "Then maybe I'll have to drag you out for something more interesting," she said, her tone playful. Warmth flared in my cheeks. "That might be nice." We ended the conversation there, returning to our tasks, but that small exchange lingered in my mind. I'd never felt such an instant sense of familiarity with anyone at work. Samantha was easy to talk to, exuding a calm self-assurance that put me at ease, yet also lit a spark of excitement I couldn't pin down. I tried to shrug it off. After all, she was just being friendly. But my calm unraveled a few nights later. It was a Wednesday. The office in post-work hush as most people trickled out by 6. I stayed late to catch up on spreadsheets, eventually looking at the time to see it was nearly 8. Then I heard footsteps. Samantha appeared by my cubicle, a bright grin on her face. "You're still here too." "Deadlines," I muttered, gesturing at my screen. "You?" She leaned against the divider. I lost track of time working on a new design mock-up. "Want to grab a bite? I'm starving." Her invitation hit me like a jolt of caffeine. We'd never spent time alone outside of coffee runs in the break room. My rational mind scrambled for excuses. I had leftover pasta at home, my cat needed feeding, anything. Instead, I found myself nodding. "Sure." We headed to a small taco stand near the office, a spot I'd only heard about from braver coworkers. The stand looked like a hole in the wall, but the smell of sizzling carne asada and fresh tortillas was mouth-watering. Samantha insisted on paying, and we took our food to a little metal table under fairy lights strung between 2 palm trees. The night was warm, the hum of traffic a steady backdrop. We ate messy tacos and shared random tidbits about our lives. She told me about leaving Chicago after a difficult breakup, how she craved a change of scene and found a job in LA on a whim. "What about you?" she asked, licking a stray bit of guacamole off her thumb. "What's your story?" My heart thudded at her directness. I didn't typically open up to people I'd known for less than a month, but something about Samantha's curious gaze melted my guard. I told her about how I'd come to LA for college, stayed because I found a decent job, and never left, though I'd sometimes questioned whether I belonged here. I admitted I kept my life simple to avoid complications. She listened intently, nodding as though she understood every unspoken nuance. By the time we finished eating, I realized the neon lights of the taco stand had grown hazy with the approach of midnight. Samantha leaned her elbows on the table, eyes on me. "Olivia, you don't have to tell me everything, but I want you to know, sometimes, taking a risk is the only way we break out of these little cages we build." The flutter in my stomach returned. I wasn't sure if she meant my career, my personal life, or both. "Maybe," I said softly. She smiled, but didn't push further. We walked back to our cars, the air thick with a tension I couldn't name. Before we parted ways, she said, "I'm glad we did this. Let's do it again." I fumbled a "sure," and she laughed, waving as she climbed into her battered Jeep. As I drove home, the city lights reflected on my windshield, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of genuine excitement. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The next few days passed in a blur of creative pitches and client deadlines. Samantha and I barely exchanged more than a few words, though I caught her eye in meetings. Each time, she'd send me a grin that felt like a shared secret. My heart would skip an unwarranted beat, but we kept it strictly professional in front of everyone else. Then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, everything shifted. I was wrapping up some paperwork at my desk when Samantha swung by, dropping into the adjacent chair with no warning. Her hair was down today, loose blonde waves brushing her shoulders. She exhaled dramatically, as though she'd been rushing. "I'm not in the mood to cook," she declared, tapping a pen on my desk. "And I have a bottle of red wine that's too good to waste on a lonely night. Come to my apartment tonight." The words spilled from her lips so naturally, as if it was something we did all the time. I blinked, my mind racing. You sure?" She tilted her head, giving me that half smile. "Why wouldn't I be?" I stumbled for a reason. It felt too personal, too sudden, but I couldn't deny the pull. "Well, we're coworkers." "And you hardly know me." "I know enough," she replied lightly, though something deeper flickered in her eyes. "I know that I enjoy talking to you, and that you could use a break from your routine. And I think you might actually enjoy seeing where I live." I hesitated, heat creeping up my neck. 1,000 protests lined themselves up in my mind. Reasons to say no, excuses about errands or exhaustion, but none of them made it past my lips. Instead, I simply nodded. "All right," I managed, nearly breathless from the rush of adrenaline. "I'll come by after work." Her smile widened, bright and genuine. "Excellent. I'll text you the address." She slid a scrap of paper across my desk, winked, and then disappeared down the hall. I stared at the paper for a long moment. Samantha lived in Silver Lake, a neighborhood known for its indie vibe, vintage shops, and hilly streets that overlooked the downtown skyline. It was a place I rarely ventured, preferring the familiarity of my own West Hollywood bubble. But here I was, fully prepared to drive across town on a random Thursday night to a coworker's apartment for wine. The rest of the workday crawled by as my nerves mounted. One side of me was thrilled at the thought of seeing Samantha outside the professional bubble. Another part felt a quiver of anxiety at crossing an invisible line. Yes, we'd had dinner at a taco stand, but that was different. Public, casual. This was her home. Our roles might blur in ways I wasn't sure I was ready to face. When 5 o'clock hit, I nearly bolted from the building. On the drive, I fought a swirl of apprehension. My GPS led me through narrow streets until I found a small complex perched near the top of a steep hill. It had large windows that glowed with warm interior light. Samantha had texted me instructions about a parking spot, so I slipped my car into the designated space and climbed a set of stairs framed by succulents in mismatched pots. She opened the door before I even knocked, as though sensing my presence. She was barefoot, wearing black leggings and an oversized flannel that looked impossibly comfortable. "You made it," she said softly. "Yeah," I breathed, stepping inside. Her loft was exactly as I imagined. Large windows overlooked the flickering lights of Los Angeles, the skyline glittering like a mosaic of tiny jewels. A record player stood in one corner, with vinyls strewn on the floor around it. Paintings, some abstract, some geometric, lined the walls. There was a faint scent of incense in the air, reminiscent of sandalwood. "I've only lived here for a couple of months," she explained, leading me through the living space. "But I love this neighborhood. Great coffee shops, live music spots, a big park nearby." My gaze fell on a collection of half-burned candles and crystals on a small table. "It's cool," I said, feeling out of place in her bohemian, colorful space. My own apartment was neat and minimal, lacking her artistic chaos. She handed me a glass of red wine, her smile wry. "You can say it's weird if you want. I'm kind of a hippie at heart." I took a careful sip, the taste rich and fruity on my tongue. "It's not weird, it suits you." She gave me a knowing look. "Loosen up, Olivia." We settled on a low couch, facing a coffee table cluttered with magazines, a couple of notebooks, and a small, succulent plant. Samantha put on a vinyl record, a woman singing in French, the melody soft and soulful. The mood was instantly intimate, like we'd stepped into a scene from an indie film. Conversation bubbled up effortlessly. She asked me about my day, my life outside work. I hesitated, admitting I didn't really have much of one. She seemed genuinely intrigued, asking if I ever traveled, if I ever went out dancing, if I had any creative outlets. I answered her questions with a bit of embarrassment. The truth was, I'd let my world become small by design. Fear of heartbreak, fear of the unknown. At some point, she disappeared into the tiny kitchen area to refill our glasses. I leaned back on the couch, glancing around. There were books stacked against the wall, poetry anthologies, photography collections, design guides. A painting on the far side depicted an abstract cityscape in bright colors, resembling LA's skyline but warped into an almost dreamlike swirl. Samantha returned, handing me a freshly filled glass. She sat close, so close that our knees brushed. My pulse sped up at the simple contact. Beneath the sweet aroma of wine, I caught a subtle note of her perfume, something earthy and floral. "Thanks," I said, my voice a notch quieter than before. My gaze darted to hers. I noticed the reflection of the lamplight in her eyes. She set her own glass on the table, leaning closer. "Tell me something real, Olivia. Something you've never told anyone at work." An unexpected lump formed in my throat. The moment crackled with tension, but it wasn't uncomfortable. "I guess, sometimes I feel like I'm just drifting," I admitted, the confession surfacing of its own accord. Like I let life happen to me instead of deciding what I really want. She lifted a hand as though to brush my hair aside, then paused. "That's brave to admit." she said softly. I don't think it's such a bad thing to let life happen now and then, but I also think we're allowed to make decisions that scare us. My heart hammered. Yeah, maybe I'm trying. She gave a small nod, and in that moment, the distance between us felt charged, like something monumental might happen if either of us moved. For a second, I wondered if I was reading too much into it, but the look on her face told me otherwise. Samantha might have seemed laid back, but there was a gravity to her that made everything around her feel more alive. I inhaled sharply, trying to gather my composure. We were colleagues. We barely knew each other. And yet, the swirl of tension building between us was undeniable. Before I could say anything else, she took a gentle breath, parted her lips as though to speak, but the words never arrived. Instead, her mouth quirked into that half-smile, and she asked if I was hungry. My head spun at the abrupt shift in topic, but I let out a laugh and nodded. We pivoted to rummaging through her fridge, which was a chaotic mix of fresh produce, leftover takeout, and random jars of sauce. We ended up sharing a plate of crackers and cheese, the conversation drifting toward trivial matters. Yet beneath every word, I sensed that something had already changed. I just didn't know what it meant, or what would happen next. When I left Samantha's loft that evening, it was well past midnight. I walked back to my car in a daze, the city's glow reflecting off the hood in muted golds. My mind spun with conflicting emotions. I had felt comfortable with her, yet in constant suspense. What was I doing? Why had it felt so natural to let her in like that? To share personal thoughts over wine in her dimly lit apartment? I hardly slept that night. My small bedroom felt stifling, and I replayed each moment. The French music, the tilt of Samantha's smile, the way the air seemed to hum whenever she inched closer. I told myself to keep it professional, to treat it as just a friendly invitation, but the intensity I sensed between us was impossible to ignore. A bigger part of me didn't even want to ignore it. The next day at the agency, I arrived with coffee in hand and a swirl of nerves in my stomach. Would she act differently? Would I? My heart thumped as I headed for my desk, scanning the open concept space for her. But Samantha was nowhere to be seen. The design team was prepping for a major client pitch, and apparently, she was in a separate conference room all morning. I tried to focus on my own tasks, but my concentration slipped. Just as I was about to step out for lunch, she breezed by my desk. She wore a casual striped tee with black jeans, her hair pinned up with a pencil. She paused, gave me a quick grin, and said, "Last night was fun. Let's do it again soon." My breath caught, but I forced a calm nod, aware of curious eyes from colleagues around us. "Sure," I said, my voice steady, at least on the surface. That simple interaction set my heart racing. All afternoon, I vacillated between excitement and apprehension. My mind conjured worst-case scenarios: gossip, confusion, heartbreak. I hadn't dated anyone seriously in years, and even then, I'd been with men. So what was happening inside me now? The questions felt too big, too raw. When 5 o'clock rolled around, I was almost relieved that Samantha didn't suggest a repeat of the previous night. I went home alone, thinking I'd find solace in my usual routine. But as I microwaved a sad leftover casserole, I realized how dull everything felt. My apartment, once my safe haven, now seemed claustrophobic. I found myself pacing around the living room, glancing at my phone, hoping it would buzz with a message from Samantha. It never did. For a few days, we drifted in a strange limbo. We remained polite and professional, though I felt an electric undercurrent every time our gazes connected. Then, one evening, as I was shutting down my computer, my phone vibrated with a text from her. "Hey, some of us are grabbing drinks tonight at this bar in Silver Lake. Wanna join?" My stomach flipped. This was different. Group drinks? Not an intimate invite. Maybe it was safer. Maybe it would help me figure out if I was imagining the tension. I typed back a quick agreement before I could second-guess myself. The bar was a tiny, hipster hideaway with moody lighting and a single neon sign that read "Bar" in cursive. A few colleagues from design were already there, laughing over some inside joke, and Samantha sat at the center, her easy laughter mingling with theirs. She waved me over, scooting a chair closer to hers. "Glad you made it," she said, her expression warm and inviting. She introduced me to 2 guys from her team, Aaron and David, and a woman from HR whose name I didn't catch. They all seemed friendly, though I sensed a slight curiosity in their eyes. Samantha had clearly spoken about me. For the first hour, the conversation was light. Office gossip, pop culture, the best live music venues in LA. At one point, Erin teased Samantha about her obsession with collecting vinyl records. She responded with an exaggerated eye roll, then turned to me as if we were sharing an inside joke from the other night at her apartment. Our eyes locked for a moment, and a silent understanding passed between us that made my heart skip. The rest of the group didn't seem to notice, or if they did, they gave no sign. They ordered another round of drinks. I felt my cheeks warming from the cocktails. Samantha offered me taste of her whiskey sour, and each time our fingers brushed, a small shiver ran through me. As the night wore on, the group thinned out. David left, then Erin, then the woman from HR. Soon, it was just Samantha and me sitting at a corner table, the bar's music thrumming gently in the background. She gazed at me with a mischievous smile. "You're quiet tonight," she said, leaning her chin on her hand. I fiddled with my half-empty glass. "Just thinking." She leaned closer, voice low. "About what?" I swallowed. "Us," I admitted, barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure where the courage came from. Her eyes darkened with something I couldn't name, a mixture of surprise and relief. "Same here," she said quietly. For a moment, neither of us moved. My heart hammered. Anyone walking by might have assumed we were just two coworkers sharing a table, but I felt like we were standing on the edge of something enormous. I remembered how safe I'd felt in her loft, how easily we talked about everything and nothing. The memory collided with the swirl of confusion in my chest, the questions about my own identity, about crossing lines at work, about the risk of heartbreak. She reached out, tentatively brushing her fingers over mine. "You look worried. We don't have to figure it all out now. Let's just let it be what it is." I exhaled a shaky laugh. "I'm not sure I know how to do that." Her smile was gentle. "Then maybe I can teach you." I didn't fully understand how significant those words were, or how my life would change, but as I let her fingertips linger against my hand, a spark of hope flared beneath the worry. Whatever fragile, unspoken bond was forming between us came to a head the following week. The agency had a major deadline looming, and both my department and Samantha's were knee-deep in final presentations. Late nights and hurried takeout became the norm. Everyone's nerves stretched thin. Despite the stress, or perhaps because of it, Samantha and I gravitated toward each other even more. We stayed late, her at her design computer and me at my spreadsheets, occasionally meeting up in the break room for a tired smile and a cup of coffee. Even those brief moments felt charged, as though an entire conversation passed between us in just a glance. Then, one Wednesday evening, as the rest of the office emptied out, she appeared at my desk. "Need a ride?" she offered, dangling car keys from her hand. "I saw you took the subway this morning." "I did," I said, blinking in surprise. "But I can just grab the train back." She shrugged. "It's dark, and you look exhausted. Let me drop you home." Before I could protest, she flashed a quick smile, and I caved. "All right," I agreed. "Thanks." Her Jeep was messy, a reflection of her creative chaos. Books, tote bags, and old receipts littered the back seat. She tossed a stray hoodie off the passenger seat so I could sit. The moment we pulled onto the road, I felt an odd sense of calm. The radio played soft indie rock, and city lights streaked past the windows. "So," she said, glancing at me when we hit a stoplight, "remember how you said you were trying to break out of your comfort zone? Want to keep going?" My pulse leaped. "What do you have in mind?" She grinned. "There's a late-night art exhibit opening downtown tonight. We could swing by, see what's up." I hesitated. It was nearing 9, and I usually like to be in bed before 11. But something in me yearned to say yes, to keep pushing beyond the confines I'd set for myself. "Okay," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Let's do it." Her grin widened. "You won't regret it." The exhibit was in a small gallery tucked behind an unassuming door in the arts district. A crowd of art students, bohemians, and city hipsters mingled around, sipping complimentary wine out of plastic cups. Samantha took my hand to guide me through the throng, and though the gesture was casual, it sent a tingle up my arm. The artwork on display was eclectic. Some pieces were photographic collages capturing city life. Others were abstract splashes of color with no apparent meaning. We drifted from piece to piece, sometimes offering quiet commentary, sometimes just taking it in. At one point, a burst of laughter erupted from a nearby group. Samantha leaned closer, her breath brushing my ear. "Thank you for coming with me," she murmured. I turned, meeting her gaze in the half-light of the gallery. Her eyes held an intensity that made the clamor of the crowd fade. "I'm glad I did," She offered a gentle smile, and for a second, it seemed we might kiss right there, surrounded by paintings and onlookers. But the moment passed when a new wave of visitors pressed in. We stepped aside, eventually finding a quieter nook near an exit door. "You know," she said softly, "the city feels different with you, like I'm seeing it through a new lens." My throat tightened. "I feel the same way," I managed to reply. She lifted her hand as though to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear, but let it drop instead, perhaps recalling we were in public. A mix of longing and uncertainty flickered across her face. "Maybe we should head out," she said, her tone a bit flustered. Back in her Jeep, the silence felt heavier than before. Finally, she spoke in a rush. "I'm sorry if I'm moving too fast, or if this feels complicated. We work together, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable." I turned in my seat, staring at her profile illuminated by passing streetlights. "Samantha, I don't know what I'm feeling, but I know I don't want to avoid it just because it's complicated." Her shoulders visibly relaxed. She put the car in drive, a soft grin tugging at her lips. "Good," she said simply. The drive to my apartment felt charged with possibilities. When we reached my building, she parked along the curb. Neither of us moved to say goodbye right away. A hum of tension filled the car. Finally, she turned off the engine. "You know," she said, her voice husky with nerves, "I could come up for a bit, if you want." My pulse fluttered at her suggestion. I thought about my tidy, boring living room, how I had no idea how to handle whatever this was. Yet the thought of sending her away felt like a loss. My mind whirled with hesitation, but my heart soared. "Okay," I whispered. We walked up the stairs in silence. The corridor lights flickered overhead as I unlocked my door. My place was neat, as always. Beige sofa, white walls, a single potted plant near the window. It struck me how plain it must look compared to her loft. Samantha slipped off her shoes and followed me inside without a word. I set my keys on the kitchen counter, turning to find her standing near the doorway, taking in my apartment's stark simplicity. Her gaze returned to me, and we locked eyes. My heart pounded so fiercely I was sure she could hear it. "This is nice," she said, though I wondered if she found it sterile. She slowly approached, her expression careful, like she was reading my every breath. "Olivia," she murmured. "Can I—" I didn't wait for her to finish. I closed the distance, my hand grazing her cheek in an unsteady motion. Her lips parted in surprise, and then we were kissing, soft and tentative at first, like we were both afraid to break the spell. But that caution gave way to a rush of pent-up longing. The world fell away, leaving only the warmth of her mouth against mine, the brush of her hands at my waist. When we finally parted, we were both breathless, eyes locked in wonder. My face burned, adrenaline surging. She swallowed hard, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Hi," she whispered, laughter in her voice. I laughed too, relief mingling with exhilaration. "Hi." My mind buzzed with a million questions, uncertainties about what this meant for us. But in that instant, I pushed them all aside. We were here, together, and it felt real in a way that both thrilled and terrified me. I woke the next morning with Samantha still beside me on the couch, both of us half upright as though we'd drifted off in mid-conversation. A knitted throw blanket from my armchair lay tangled around our legs. Early sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, I watched her sleep, her hair falling across her face, her lips parted in a soft exhale. Everything within me urged me to freeze time, to linger in this fragile place where confusion could be swept aside, replaced by the warmth of her presence. But reality had other plans. My phone's alarm blared, reminding me we had work. She stirred, blinking awake. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice low and raspy. A flutter of happiness surged in my chest. "Morning." We locked eyes, and I saw the moment when recollection replaced sleep. A slow, cautious smile touched her lips. "I guess we should get ready for the day." I nodded, standing up to stretch and stifle a yawn. My body ached from sleeping in such an awkward position, but my heart felt oddly light. She grabbed her things, and I offered her the bathroom to freshen up. I rummaged through my closet, half in a daze. It struck me that I'd never had a moment like this with a coworker, let alone a woman. By the time we left my apartment, we both looked a bit more presentable. Samantha in yesterday's outfit, me in a change of clothes. We grabbed coffee from a nearby cafe, the conversation stilted with the weight of unspoken thoughts. I wondered if she regretted crossing that line, but her occasional glances told me otherwise. At the office, we arrived separately, trying to maintain a semblance of professionalism. I found myself hyper-aware of her presence, scanning the open floor to see where she was. She was busy with the design team, but we exchanged the briefest of smiles when our paths intersected. The day dragged. By late afternoon, I was restless and uncertain. Would we talk about what happened? Was it just a one-time thing? A dozen times, I nearly walked over to her station but lost my nerve each time. Eventually, around 5, she came to me. "Walk with me," she murmured, eyes flicking to a hallway at the back of the office. My heart tripped over itself as I followed her to a quiet corridor near the printer room. Once alone, she turned, crossing her arms in a gesture that looked more defensive than casual. "This is crazy, right?" she asked softly. "I mean, we work together, and we barely know each other." My stomach sank. "Yeah," I said, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "It is," she exhaled, uncrossing her arms. "But I don't regret it." Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. "I don't either." The corners of her mouth lifted. "So, what now?" I swallowed hard. I'm not entirely sure. Part of me is freaking out about how this complicates everything. Another part of me doesn't care. She nodded slowly. "We can be discreet, if that's what we want. Or maybe we just see how it goes. I don't usually hide who I am, but we do have to be careful at work. Office gossip travels fast." My mind flashed with images of rumor-fueled stares. "Let's be cautious for now," I said quietly. "I need time to figure out where I stand." A soft understanding lit her features. She reached out and brushed my arm with the back of her fingers. "Okay, whatever we do, we'll do it together." I left that conversation feeling a potent mix of excitement and dread. Our secret felt like a live wire, humming with the potential to upend my carefully crafted world. But each time I remembered the warmth of her lips, the honesty in her eyes. I couldn't bring myself to regret a single thing. Keeping things under wraps at the office proved more challenging than I'd expected. Samantha and I maintained our usual roles. She pitched designs, I oversaw project details, but the stolen glances, the subtle touches, the suppressed smiles all added up. I was constantly on edge, both exhilarated and terrified someone would catch on. Meanwhile, we continued seeing each other outside of work. Sometimes it was her place, other times mine. Occasionally, we met up for coffee in neighborhoods far from the agency, just to talk without fear of prying eyes. Each time, I felt myself sinking deeper into a connection I never anticipated. But as weeks passed, my anxiety grew. I worried about office rumors, about how this shift in my personal life might transform my identity. I'd never officially labeled my orientation, and the questions swirling in my mind felt bigger than either of us. On top of that, Samantha's effortless approach to life, her willingness to just go for it, clashed with my ingrained caution. One Friday evening, after a grueling deadline, a group from the office decided to celebrate at a swanky rooftop bar downtown. Samantha and I both went, determined to act casual. But I noticed one of my coworkers, Rachel, watching us with speculative eyes as we made small talk around the group. The prickle of being observed made me snap. Later that night, Samantha and I ended up in a quiet corner near the bar's edge. The city lights sparkled below, and music pulsed from inside. She leaned against the railing, sipping a cocktail. I tried to voice what was eating at me. It's just, everything feels so intense. Between us, and I'm worried we'll lose control. She reached for my hand under the small bar table, concealed from others. I get it, but maybe losing a bit of control is okay sometimes. My breath hitched. I'm just not used to it. You're fearless, Samantha. I'm not. She gave me a sad, understanding smile. I'm not fearless. I just choose to take risks even when I'm terrified. Life's too short to stay locked in place. I opened my mouth to respond, but Rachel appeared out of nowhere, her eyes flicking to our near-joined hands. A flicker of surprise registered on her face before she schooled her expression into neutrality. My pulse pounded. Samantha pulled her hand away with a nervous laugh, pretending to adjust her watch. Rachel asked some innocent question about Monday's schedule, but I could see a million unspoken questions shimmering behind her eyes. The tension in the air was palpable. When she left, I let out a shaky breath. Samantha touched my shoulder gently. Hey, it's all right. But it wasn't. My panic spiked, dread of workplace gossip overshadowing my feelings. I mustered a weak smile and mumbled something about needing fresh air. I took the elevator down alone. Samantha didn't follow me, likely confused by my sudden retreat. I drove home in a haze. By the time I reached my apartment, tears pricked at my eyes. It wasn't just the fear of rumor, it was the fear of admitting that I might actually want this, that I wanted her. It was as if my mind was locked in an internal war. Half of me wanted to fling open the door to this new part of my life. The other half wanted to slam it shut for good. When I woke the next morning, my phone showed missed calls and texts from Samantha. She'd left worried messages, asking if I was okay, if we needed to talk. Guilt churned in my gut, but I still didn't have answers for her or for myself. All day, I paced my living room. My plant by the window drooped, needing water, so I did that. I organized my bookshelf by genre, anything to avoid responding to Samantha. Eventually, though, I couldn't run from it anymore. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding, and typed, "Can we talk?" The response came within a minute. Always. That evening, I stood in front of Samantha's loft. My stomach knotted as I knocked, replaying 100 scenarios for how this conversation might go. She opened the door, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Come in," she said softly. The space was dimly lit, the scent of incense curling through the air. She wore a loose t-shirt and yoga pants, hair up in a messy bun. I realized I'd never found her more beautiful. I stepped inside, closing the door gently behind me. We stood there, unsure. Finally, I blurted, "I'm sorry I freaked out last night. It's not about you. It's about me, my fears, my confusion." She nodded. "I understand, but I need to know where we stand. I don't want to push you into something that scares you." My throat tightened. "I'm scared either way," I admitted, "but I don't want to lose what we have. I think I want this. Whatever this is." She approached, stopping inches away. "I care about you, Olivia, and I don't want to hide it, but I will if that's what you need right now." The unguarded sincerity in her voice nearly unraveled me. I realized how deeply I'd come to care about this woman, in ways I'd never expected. The old me would have run at the first sign of such vulnerability. But tonight, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. She held me, her breath shaky against my shoulder. "Let's figure it out together," I whispered, "one step at a time." When we kissed, there was no hesitation, no fear, just a calm certainty that this was right, at least for this moment, and maybe that was enough. We talked late into the night, sprawled on her couch with the city lights beyond the windows. She told me about her own fears, about leaving Chicago after heartbreak and how she was determined not to waste life. I confessed my struggles with needing control and how this entire experience felt like leaping off a cliff. We cried a little, laughed a lot. By the time I drifted off in her arms, my heart felt full. A peaceful sense of new beginnings tinged my dreams. I woke to the sunrise glowing on her face. In that fragile morning light, I knew that, no matter how scared I was, I couldn't deny my feelings anymore. Here, in Samantha's presence, I felt more alive than I ever had in the safety of my old routines. Life didn't become magically simple after that day, of course. We had to navigate office politics, hush speculation, and discuss boundaries. There were moments I was overwhelmed with doubt, but each time, Samantha's unwavering confidence in us brought me back. Slowly, I learned to loosen the tight grip I kept on my life, embracing the messy, exhilarating rush of following my heart. Some mornings, I still wake up to the city's golden glow, feeling both freedom and loneliness. But then I remember that I'm not truly alone. There's someone in this sprawling metropolis who sees me, truly sees me, and invites me to take risks instead of hiding in routine. And each time I step into her loft, with its towering windows and faint incense, I remember what it means to choose feeling over fear. So that's my story. The new girl at work, Samantha, invited me to her apartment one night, and nothing was ever the same. It wasn't a single moment that changed me, but rather a series of small invitations, both literal and metaphorical, to step beyond the familiar boundaries I'd set. And once I did, I found that the world was bigger, brighter, and more beautiful than I ever dared to imagine. What about you? Have you ever ignored something your heart was screaming for you to accept?